student of BBA LLB Honors 5th year, would like to welcome all the learned intellectuals and inquisitive participants to this thought-provoking and valuable session on juvenile in conflict with law, special reference to IPC. The keynote speaker for this session is Professor Dr. Kavita Singh Ma'am from National University of Judicial Sciences, West Bengal. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining this session. And thank you so much for accepting our invitation. I think that this webinar would be fruitful for all the students who have joined this session. So now I would like to take up this opportunity to introduce you all to our keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Kavita Singh ma'am. Just a second. Ma'am has completed her graduation from University of North Bengal in 1995, and then consecutively she has completed she has completed her PhD from University of North Bengal itself in the year 2008. Before joining NUJS, she has also been lecturer at University of North Bengal and SK Acharya Institute of Law, Kalyani University. Ma'am has also been a part of some of the prestigious research works of India, such as prison reforms in India, assigned by Bureau of Police Research, Government of India. She has been the coordinator of it. She has also been a part of the research work which was titled Human Rights Outreach, organized by British Council, National Law School, Bangalore, and University of Warwick, UK. She was the principal investigator of a project funded by West Bengal Judicial Academy titled A Study of Adoption in West Bengal under the Juvenile Justice, Care and Protection of Children Act 2000. Ma'am has authored two books named as Human Rights and Terrorism Laws in India and A Study of Jurisprudence in India under Criminal Justice Administration, published by Central Law Publication in 2010 and Eastern Law House in 2018, respectively. Many of her scholarly articles has been published by some of the renowned law journals of India. She holds various positions in NUJS, including member of Academic Council, Doctoral Committee, Faculty Advisor Committee, and many more. Apart from this, she is also a visiting faculty at various prestigious Indian institutions such as Central Detective Training College, Government of India, Kolkata, Central Bureau of Investigation Training Center, Kolkata, West Bengal Judicial Academy, Kolkata, and Swami Vivekanand State Police Academy, Barakpur, West Bengal. And there is a long list of accomplishments which are attached with Kavita ma'am, and I think it will take a day long to elaborate everything. So without wasting a single moment, I would like to directly connect with Kavita ma'am. Ma'am, please enlighten your valuable knowledge with us. Thank you, ma'am. Yeah. Ashish, have you allowed? Please allow Kavita ma'am to speak.
Thank you, Nishant. It is my honor and pleasure to be associated with your esteemed institution. This is not the first time which I am addressing the faculty and the students. Previously also I have got the opportunity of speaking to the students and faculty. It is a long association. I would thank the organizer for inviting me. And when the organizers asked me as to what should be the topic of my discussion today, so I thought that today crime against children, crime committed by children are on rise, and there needs to be a clarity while the is discussing relating to the children, offences committed by children. So thank you, Moin sir, and thank you, Vitu Singh and Sudhir sir. We are like associated in many endeavors. So I would continue my association with you all. Coming to the today's discussion, uh, you must be wondering that why did I choose IPC? Because the common understanding today is that the IPC is an outdated law, and law relating to children in IPC is also an outdated provisions which are there. So what I thought was that the importance of IPC in presence of Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act is to be understood in the light that Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act at the very beginning talks about child in conflict with law, but does not give complete immunity to the child who has committed crime. So we will discuss the different concepts which are there in the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act. But prior to that, let me talk about Section 82 and 83. As you all know, Section 82 is relating to the maxim Dolly in Capax. That means that child below the age of 7 years is incompetent to deal with, to commit crime. When we talk about Section 83 in IPC, 83 lays down Dolly Capax. Dolly Capax means that a child who has maturity and understanding while he commits crime, then in that case, the child will not be given any immunity. So the maturity level of the child has to be understood, and then the court would punish the child accordingly. So this provision is there since 1860. Now when I'm talking about Dolly in Capax is a provision which gives absolute immunity. Absolute immunity means that a child who is below 7 years of age, and if he has committed any crime, irrespective of say murder, being part of dacoity team, or being part of any serious heinous crime, abduction, kidnapping and all, then that child will not be given any punishment, nor a case would start against that child. So this is a huge leeway which one child should get. Now, before coming to the Indian law, let me talk about when this law was drafted for the Indians. The law in England was completely different. Child below the age of 12 years was considered to be Dolly in Capax. Now, when Macaulay drafted this law for the Indians, considered that the Indian children were more matured at a tender age of 7, and the Dolly in Capax provision inserted that a child below the age of 7 years would be imbued from any punishment. But when we look into the qualified immunity which was there in England, there you will find that the child between the age of 12 years and 16 years were given qualified immunity. Qualified immunity means that the person has certain maturity of understanding of what the crime he has committed, and accordingly he acted. So if I compare with the English position in 1860 and Indian position, children between the age of 7 years and 12 years were given qualified immunity. So, the discrimination which the lawmakers made at that point of time regarding the Indian children was highly, we need to understand that, how the discrimination was made between an Indian children and an English child. So, coming down to the present scenario, when we had the old 1986 Juvenile Justice Act, In old Juvenile Justice Act, we did not have the absolute immunity provision there. And when we got the new, removed the 86 law and came up with the 2000 law, that is Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act 2000, there also this absolute immunity was not there. And when we talk about the 2015 child in conflict with law provision, there also the complete immunity or absolute immunity which we talk about is not there. So we need to refer to IPC only when we are considering that the child who is below the age of 7 years will be availing absolute immunity. No investigation would start against him, or neither he will be prosecuted nor he will be punished. That provision is there only in IPC. So the relevance of 82 and 83 is there even till date. Now coming to the 83, how to determine that the child has certain maturity level. In those cases, I'll give you only two examples. First example is that the child was playing in the courtyard of one person where his mother was working, and in the courtyard he got a gold chain. Now here you will see that after getting the gold chain, he gave it to his mother in one situation. In the second situation, immediately after getting the gold chain, the child goes to the goldsmith and sells the gold chain for 100 rupees. You can get the differences here. Here, the child got a gold chain, which is there in one of the person's courtyard where he was playing, and he gives to his mother. So he does not understand the value of the item which he has found, and he gives it to his mother. So there you will see that he does not have the sufficient maturity. Now, second situation you will find that same child who is within the age of 7 years and 12 years, he got the chain, immediately goes to the goldsmith's house and sells it off. So that shows that he did not look for the owner of the gold chain, and he had gone to sell it off. That shows, until he had got it in his hand, that is not an offense. It is not neither an offense when he is playing with it, but it becomes an offense when he does not give it to the owner of the house, because that premises is having an ownership. And when it goes to the goldsmith shop and sells it, that lays down that he has sufficient maturity of understanding the value of the product, and he did not act according to the need of the law, and he violated the law by selling it off. So now you may ask me a question as to, ma'am, any product which is found outside, no one is the owner. So the founder is the owner. But here I'm talking about a product which is found in a premises. That means anyone who has access to that premises is the owner of the property. So without the permission of the owner, one cannot take it away, and that would amount to theft. In another situation, there, you will find that one girl about 10 to 12 years of age, already married to a boy about 13, 14 years of age. It's a very old case. In that, the mother-in-law and the father-in-law used to beat this girl frequently for playing with her husband. Now, one day what happened, she found that her husband is sleeping in the night, and he was never being beaten, he was never being tortured. Only the girl was being tortured for playing with her husband, who was only of 10 to 11 years of age. So she killed her husband with a sharp kitchen knife. And after killing, she left for her own village. Now, in the night only she left. When in the morning the parents come to know about the death of the son, they lodged an FIR. Then police started looking for the girl. Now, after seeing the police coming towards her, she hid herself in the behind the bush. So this shows that she knew that she had the sufficient understanding or maturity level that she had committed certain wrong, and for which she would be punished. And here you will see that this was considered as a determining factor of the maturity level of the child who was between the age of 7 years and 12 years. But if I come to the current position of law relating to the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act, in Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act, if we read primarily, the understanding is that a child who has not completed 18 years would be um, tried differently. Now, what is the reason and requirement of trying differently? The requirement is that the children are the future generation of the society and the state, and they need to be protected, and they need to be given an environment which is different from the common environment, and so that the child does not become a serious heinous criminal in future. So say if the child is been treated like an adult and taken to the court, and then he is being tried, and he is being prosecuted every day, he faces the uh, normal courts, and he comes in company with the serious heinous criminals who are there in the custody along with the others, so that would that would become a training center for this child, who would in return become a serious heinous criminal. So he has committed an offense which may be heinous crime or which may not be heinous crime or petty crime. So the need was felt that these children needs to be segregated from the serious heinous criminals, and first custody has to be set. Secondly, for the psychological and the mental health of these children, they should be kept separate and given special treatment, so that they would become a responsible citizen of the country in future. Now that can only be possible, that is, if we apply the therapeutic approach. And the therapeutic approach is that we need to first reform them, then reintegrate them into the society. So reformation, rehabilitation and reintegration are the triple therapeutic approach which would actually work for these children. So, the procedure started, as I told you, in 1986, and it is still going on. But we find that there are a rise of crime by children in the society. And, sometimes children are being used. Children are being used by the adults for criminal purposes, so that, the adults would escape punishment, or the work may be done by the child and child will be treated separately and would escape punishment. So, there is a nexus going on in the society, which actually hampers the process of reformation, rehabilitation and reintegration, no doubt. But the responsibility of the state cannot be shredded away. So state had come after the Nirbhaya's case, and one of the criminals in the Nirbhaya case was a juvenile, and he was just 18 years 6 months, about to become an adult. Was the one who had committed the serious acts more, and he got a punishment of only 3 years. So, keeping in mind that the law was changed in the year 2015. So, the provisions were made more stringent, and the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act was thoroughly replaced by the 2015 law. And there were a lot of changes. If I teach this, this is a whole course, but I will only emphasize into the few important points which are required for us to discuss this Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act. Now, in the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act, the old and the new had certain common provisions and concepts which are relevant from us for us. That is the board, Juvenile Justice Board. And similarly, in 2015 law, the Juvenile Justice Board was made a competent authority to deal with the matters pertaining to children in conflict with law and takes appropriate steps for rehabilitation. So as I told you, without reformation, rehabilitation and reintegration, the purpose of the Juvenile Justice Act cannot be fulfilled. Now, the second important requirement was that in every police station there is a required position known as child welfare police. So child welfare police, not below the rank of assistant sub inspector, and he has to be in coordination with the NGOs, have to work for the reformation, rehabilitation, and reintegration of the children. There was a new addition that this law, at par with POCSO law, came up with a new special court known as Children's Court. So, Children's Court, if you look into this 2012 POCSO law, there was a requirement of Children's Court, and when the POCSO law was passed, every High Court designated the second additional district judge court as a children court, and the same court under the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act was designated as a court for the juvenile in conflict with law. Now, if you look into this is especially a sessions court, and that means apart from the board, there was children court also. I'll come to the children court's powers and functions, but for the understanding of the conceptual understanding, we need to understand that how this children court was, or how this children court came into existence. Now, in this law, as the other law, there's a requirement of probation officer, and this probation officer is appointed according to the Probation of Offenders Act 1958. And prior to 2015, in the old 2000 law, children could not be given punishment of life imprisonment and death, or 7 years above imprisonment. Now you will see that as if we are treating the children at par with the adults in certain cases, then we need to have to give these punishments. But there is a requirement of probation officer under the law who is going to take care of the whereabouts of the children, and the probation officer has also a role when the board is inquiring into the whereabouts of the child prior to the commission of the offense, after the commission of the offense, and when he is convicted. The role of the probation officer is very important, and state government appoints the probation officer under the Probation of Offenders Act. This is a very important act, though it has not been used to the often. And another very important concept which came here with relating to the manpower empowerment of the institution of juvenile justice, that is Special Juvenile Police Unit. So I have also written a paper on Special Juvenile Police Unit, which is yet to be published, forthcoming publication. So, the role of Special Juvenile Police Unit is very important. And the Special Juvenile Police Units are created again under the Ministry of Women and Child Welfare, and in every state, and they are going to monitor the cases by the Child Rights Commission and the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act and the Children Court cases. So they are the ones who are the investigating officers also, and they are having the responsibility of informing, rehabilitating, and reintegrating these juveniles in conflict with law. Now we come down to the second part of our discussion. In this discussion, I'm going to talk about the procedures which are there in the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act to deal with the children in conflict with law. Now, this is there in the chapter 4 of the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act 2015. When a child is apprehended, alleged to be in conflict with law, then in that case, the procedures to be followed stepwise. First step is that the police will inform the juvenile, special juvenile police unit about the case. After this, the case will be forwarded to the child welfare police officer of the concerned police station. And in order to keep the record of the case, there will be an entry made in the child fact portal. You must be knowing about this, as there was a judgment by the Supreme Court that if there is a child missing or any case has been registered against the child or child committing the crime, then in that case it has to be immediately uploaded in the child track portal. So this is the first step where the entry has to be made in the child track portal or track child portal. Now the second step is that there has to be if there is a petty cases, then the case has to be registered in the general diary, and if it is a serious or heinous case, then there has to be a first information report entry, depending upon the nature and the offense committed, nature of the offense committed by the child. Now, when the FIR is recorded, police involving cognizable offense, the reports and records of the cases involving non-cognizable offense are recorded in the daily diary register, that is generally known as the diary. Okay, so the third step is that the child will be sent for medical examination, and this examination shall be carried out by a designated child well-being and protection officer or special juvenile police unit. Furthermore, the information about the apprehension shall be sent to the parents and the probation officer to carry out the investigation. Now, when I'm talking about medical examination, what is to be done in the medical examination? There, during the medical examination, a preliminary inquiry by the medical officer regarding the maturity level of the child has to be taken care of. That was the child sufficient enough to commit a serious heinous crime, and that report has to be attached when the child is placed before the juvenile justice court. So what happens is that then the juvenile justice board is going to forward that case to the children's court. So the importance of this medical examination is very much essential, and that actually would determine that the child will be tried as an adult or the child would be tried as a juvenile. So, but we, in my practical experience shows that, this procedure is, or the objective of having this procedure in the law has been frustrated because the doctors doing the medical examination do not actually certify the maturity level of the child. Now, there are a lot of studies. If you want to do an extensive research, you will find that the brain of a child below the age of 18 years, or a person who has not completed 18 years, is not developed so much as to understand the severity of an act which he or she is committing. Now, what happens is that we differentiate. We differentiate in the sense when it is the question of our own child or anyone related to us, we act differently. But if it is someone else's child, then we act differently. So there we say, think that they are matured enough. Like once in one of my judge friend told me, Kavita, when I see the eye of the child, I can make out that he is such a huge big criminal. I said, how do you find out? Sometimes the children are angry or children are, similarly it can happen with our own child also. But how do you in the first appearance understand that he might have committed the crime? So, the mindset is such that we don't have a sympathy toward others' children as we have for our own children. So that makes, and the mindset of the judge is also very, they need high sensitization, and even after sensitization, proper training. Not only sensitization, they need to be trained. And when I talk about this medical examination, they should be trained by expert medical officers who would actually teach them about the maturity level, how to assess the maturity level with the circumstantial facts of the case. Then we come down that the child has to be again, as according to the law, that within 24 hours he has to be presented before the board, and if the board is not in session, then the child has to be produced before any of the members who is present, and then the member has to be cognizance of the case have to be taken by the court. Now, if we see presently that in almost every subdivision and districts, we are having these juvenile justice boards there. So earlier, when the law came in 2000, there was same judge functioning as a judicial magistrate, and in the first half and the second half, he was sitting in the board as a juvenile justice member. So now that position has changed, which is a recommendable position. Now that we have designated board available with 3 members. Fifth step is that the child has to be produced before the relevant authorities for time being. That is, if the child has committed a crime in conflict with law, then he can be sent to a observation home until the inquiry is complete or investigation is complete, place of safety for a temporary shelter, or the child may be bailed out by the board to the parents. Now, while bailing out the child to the parents, the board has to be sufficiently alert to see that the parents who have come to take the child are the genuine ones, and proper documentation of the parenthood has to be taken by the board before handing out the child to the parents. Sixthly, the sixth step is that the designated child well-being and protection officer shall forward the information to the DLSA, that is the District Legal Services Authority, and State Legal Services Authority, in order to assess whether free legal aid can be provided to the child in conflict with. Then we come down that if it is a child in conflict with law, what should be done and what should not be done at the time of apprehension. So first important thing is that the child should not be kept in a police lockup. There has to be a child-friendly corner in every police station, and that child-friendly corner should be given to the child for the time being transit between the police station to the court. And in no case, the child should be kept along with the adult criminals in the police custody. Secondly, that if there is a delay in transfer of child from the police station to the court, then the observation home can be availed for the time being. Thirdly, the child should not be handcuffed or chained. The child must be provided with appropriate medical assistance. And if the child do not understand the language which the police station officers know, then the language which the child understands has to be, an interpreter knowing the language has to be, or help of that interpreter has to be taken for understanding the statement given by the child, and then accordingly written into the language and of the child which the child understands, and read it out to the child. Child has to be provided fooding, proper clothing, in the sense, if it is a winter season and the child does not have any winter clothes, then the child has to be provided with the winter clothes. Similarly, if he is not having sufficient clothes, then clothing have to be provided to the child. The child is to be, when the child's statement is to be recorded, if there is availability of the parents of the child, then the parents have to be present when the child's statement is required. Now, as any other law, the Miranda rights have to be availed to the child, and the child cannot be forced to confess the guilt. Child cannot be compelled to sign any statement. The officer who is inquiring or investigating has to be in normal clothing and not in his regular dress. That is the official dress. And if the child is a female child, then the investigation has to be done by a female child welfare police officer. So you will see that the role of the child welfare police officer is very important. And my personal experience shows in West Bengal that most of the the number of police stations I visited, and I know all the police child welfare police officers are lady officers, and they are quite active in dealing with the children psychology and mental health. So when the child welfare police officer is produced before the juvenile justice board, the same officer has to take care of the child even when he is being produced in the board until he is handed over to the institution, that is the observation home or the special shelter home for these children. So now we come down to the aspect of medical examination. Now when the child in conflict with law, there is a doubt that the child has been subjected to sexual abuse, or there is a high risk of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, then in that case, the medical examination becomes more important. And therefore, the responsibility of the child welfare officer is to take the child to the hospital for medical examination. The child should have to be made comfortable. If the child is a female child, then the medical examination should be done by a female doctor. The procedure of medical examination must be made clear. Child has to be taken in confidence, and the anxiety and discomfort of the child has to be taken care of. And child cannot be asked questions which would actually hurt her sentiments or his sentiments, and child cannot be asked any personal question. So these are the steps to be taken by the medical officer, or the procedure when the medical examination is been done. Now, when the child is in conflict with law, has to be produced before the board within 24 hours. The board shall have to conduct an inquiry in compliance with the provision and may pass such orders in relation to the child as it is fit according to the section 17 and 18 of the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act. Now, in the cases where it is a serious heinous crime committed by the child, then in that case, a preliminary assessment by the board has to be done, and then within the period of 3 months from the date of the initiation of the case, first produced before the board has to be transferred to the children court. Now, when we are talking about the role of the persons whose care the child is being placed, this person is, this institution is very important. The child has to be handed over to a responsible institution and a registered institution. If the institution is not a registered institution, then the responsibility would be on the child welfare police officer, who in return can be questioned regarding to why he did not handed it over to an institution which is a registered institution. Apart from that, the role of the court is also very important. The court also has to determine that if the child has to be given to an institution or to the fit person, then that fit person is the near relative or parents of the child or not, and the documentation of these parents and child and whereabouts have to be taken well off before handing over the child. Then we come down to the provision if the child has to be released on bail. Then what procedure has to be followed? Now, when the child has to be extended on bail, then in that case, the child can be released either with surety or without surety on personal bond. Now, who is going to give the bond on behalf of the child? The responsibility is of the fit person or the parents or the relatives who is taking in custody of the child, and the bond or the surety has to be responsible for bringing that child before the board or the children court. Now, if we look into the role of the parents, guardians, and probation officer, I have actually mostly discussed the responsibility of the parents and the guardians and probation officer in brief. Now let me discuss it in a little detail. Here, when the case has been registered or a child has been apprehended, the child welfare officer is going to inform the parents, guardians, or if parents and guardians are not available, then to the probation officer. Now here, after getting the information, the role of the parents, guardians, or probation officer becomes important. That means the parents, guardians are going to, during the inquiry period or investigation period, inform the child welfare officer the whereabouts of the child prior to the commission of the offense. So, was he studying, was he in school, what kind of company he kept, who were the people whom he used to mix, and so on and so forth. So, this cooperation or the parents, guardians, or probation officers' cooperation in building up the case is very important. So, the welfare officer or the special juvenile police unit to which the child was brought must be responsible enough. Like, in adult's case, when a person is taken into custody by the investigating officer, he has to inform his lawyer or relatives as soon as possible. So here also in this juvenile justice system, the information to these people are important. Now, the probation officer has to submit his report, that is social investigating report, within 2 weeks of the information received by the probation officer regarding the background of the child and the other material for assistance to the board for initiating inquiry procedure. Now, on the basis of this social investigating report, the child will get bail. So he should be released or he should not be released, will depend upon the social investigating report. Now, say if he is in company of criminals, or the environment in which he lives is full of surrounding full of criminal activity, then in that case the board would not actually release the child on bail and send the child to the observation home or shelter home or juvenile justice home for the children in conflict with law. So that the social investigating report by the probation officer is very, very important. Then we come down to the procedure as to how the inquiry by the board will be done. As in other cases, here also there has to be a fair and speedy inquiry by the board. The board, at the time of initiation of inquiry, board must be satisfied that a child who is in conflict with law is not subjected to any ill treatment by police officials or any other person. This includes the lawyer, probation officer, NGOs, and etc. Why am I putting etc.? Because in the transit period, there may be other people who are in company with the child, or the co-mates who are there along with the child. So moreover, if you see, the board recognizes the child has been subjected to ill treatment and it will take corrective steps to actually do justice. Then we see that the child, the proceeding against the child who is in conflict with law must take place in a simplest manner, and this is done to ensure that the child is given a child-friendly atmosphere. Now, the 2015 law was brought in with a broader requirement of giving the child a child-friendly atmosphere, not only in the police station, but also in the court during the trial, and also in the home which their child is being kept. So the child, when brought before the board, must be given an opportunity of being heard and adequate participation in the inquiry process. So the board has to give sufficient time, the lawyers have to give sufficient time, the investigating officer has to give sufficient time. Uh, if the case is an petty case, then the summary trial will be there. If the case is a serious heinous offense, then the board is going to transfer the case to the children court. Now coming down to the aspect of heinous offense. If the inquiry has to be made of heinous offense. So a child who is above the age of 16 years, below the age of one who has not completed 18 years, has committed any serious heinous crime. So if he has not committed serious heinous crime, then he will not be referred to the children court, or inquiry or investigation will not take place as per the as per the heinous crime. But if it is a heinous crime, then the board is going to transfer after the preliminary inquiry the case to the children court. Now, child who is above the age of 16 years on the date when the offense was committed. So here we must remember that even if he is apprehended later on and he had committed the crime when he was a child who has not completed 18 years, then he would be dealt as according to the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act. So the board reserves the right to pass any orders which when the board feels necessary and fit for the child. The board can send the child to observation home or place of safety or fit place, or can bail him out if he deems fit. Now, after the procedure of inquiry, the board is satisfied with the circumstances of the child, can transfer the child to the committee if the child is in need of care and protection. So in many cases, the child who is in conflict with law and is a victim of procedure of crime, that is re-victimized, then the child becomes a child in conflict with law. So then the child can be sent to the child welfare board for proper treatment. Now, after the preliminary assessment into the heinous offense, the board is going to refer the case to the children court, and if the case is say where there are many children involved, too many children involved in one crime, and only one of them or two of them are involved in serious heinous crime, then the report prepared by the investigating officer will be made in duplicate, one sent to the court, and the others will be tried in the board, and accordingly the procedure will be followed. So the board is going to take the help of the experienced psychologists, psychosocial workers, and other experts suitable for the job for determining the maturity level of the child along with the doctors. So the cases of trial, either summary trial or summary trial cases, the procedure will be according to the CRPs. So coming down to the orders which can be passed against the child or child in conflict with law. If the board is going to pass the order and is satisfied with the inquiry, irrespective of his age, that he has committed petty, serious or serious offense and he is below the age of 16 years, then in that case, the board is going to pass any on the basis of the social investigation report, any order deemed fit. Now, when I'm talking about any order deemed fit, there the provision is that the child can be released on admonition and probation, child can be given lesser imprisonment period, and that lesser imprisonment period can be passed in the juvenile home, specifically where the counseling, reformation, rehabilitation, vocational training will be given to the child, so that when on completing the period of punishment, the child will be reintegrated into the society as according to the law. So, if you look into that, what orders can be passed by the board? Firstly, you can allow the child to go if the compliance with the procedure of inquiry and there is counseling given to the child to the parents or guardians. A board can direct the child to participate in group counseling and activities of similar nature. It can also issue an order the child must perform community services. You know, the need of the hour today is that we must uh, you know, use community services as a punishment more and more, so that the people who are first time offenders, children who by matter of chance had come in company of criminals would get an opportunity of being reformed and rehabilitated. The person, when a person is released on probation, then there is a strict supervision, surveillance on that child, and the organization and the institution, as per the board, think fit, can be ordered. Board can order child to or his parents or guardian to pay fine, and provide that if child is working as a child labor, is not, the provisions of the child labor are not violated. Because we have recently amended our Prohibition of Child Labor Act, as you know. Children can be child labor can be taken by home institution. Say if the family is running a business and that business child labor can be taken, but beyond the school hours. So the board has to take into account that if the family is having such kind of business in which child can also be involved for working, then child labor should not be taken during the school hours. So board has to take account of that. Now board can allow the child to release on probation for his good behavior and can place him under the care of parents and guardians or fit person. The board will execute a bond with such person or with surety that the person will work for the child's good and good conduct and well-being of the child, not exceeding 3 years. The board can direct the child to be released on uh, after admonition also, just scolding and asking him not to indulge, allow him to lead a proper life after release. And for the reformation, the educational facility, development of skills, counseling, behavioral modification therapy, and psychological support can be provided by the board to the child, and regular report from that institution has to be provided to the board for looking after that well-being of the child post release. Now, apart from these orders, some additional order, if I would emphasize, is that child can be asked to attend school, and from the school, proper report that he is attending school and doing well in school has to be taken care of. Attend vocational training centers, attend therapeutic centers. Then prohibition orders can also be passed that child cannot visit particular places, particular locality, particular area where criminal activities are being taking place. And if the child is indulged in say substance abuse, then the de-addiction program can also be ordered by the board. Now, board after preliminary assessment, as I told you, can find that the child is indulged in serious heinous crime, who is above 16 years of age, was not completed 18 years of age, will be referred to the children court for proper trial. So these are the orders which the board can pass. Now, when we're talking about, there are certain cases where once the child is released after the investigation process is over, during the trial stage, the child runs away, or the child is not been found. Then in such situation, the provisions are laid down in the Juvenile Justice Act, Section 26, which talks about that if the child has been run away from a special home, observation home, or home meant for juvenile in conflict with law, then in that case, the, the child welfare officer has to take the initiative of finding out the child, and after taking in custody of the child, produced before the board within 24 hours, or before the children court um, within 24 hours. Now, when the child is a runaway child, then the child needs more care and protection, because he understands that he would be convicted and he would be punished. So then in that case, more care has to be taken towards this child, to take the child in confidence, so that the child would understand what is good and bad for the child. So here, the section 26 has laid down uh, provisions uh, for proper taking care of these children. Now, when we are talking about children who are being referred to the children court, uh, there again, when the child is being referred to the children court, he would be tried as an adult. But the if he has not completed 18 years, then the court is going to see the segregation of this child, so that they do not come in company of the adult criminals, and um, get again proper training of becoming a serious criminal. Though he has committed a serious, when we are talking about serious crime, what do we mean? Generally, our understanding is that one who committed an offense which is punishable above 7 years, which can go to the extent of life imprisonment or death penalty. So those cases are considered as a serious heinous crime. Uh, Therefore, what happens? Though the child has been involved in commission of serious heinous crime, uh, irrespective of that, the child needs a different treatment. Now, when this law 2015 came in was enforced, I had serious, um, you know, problem in taking into this provision of treating the child who is below the age of 18 years and who is above the age of 16 years, uh, treating him at par with adult and trying them in the criminal court. The reason was that, from the human rights perspective, a child who has committed crime, who has committed serious heinous crime, as I just now told you, that that child also needs a different treatment. That itself shows that his upbringing, education, treatment at home or in the surroundings or in the school are not sufficient enough to make him a responsible person or responsible child in the society. So there would have been circumstances or facts behind the case where the upbringing of that child was not proper. Say if a child gets a environment where he is allowed to grow, fulfill all his needs, then in that case, the child would not resort to crime in any circumstance. Apart from that, the age between 16 and 18 is such an age where the child not only grows mentally but also grows physically. So physical development takes place. We as a society members or family members or parents or school authorities are to be made responsible, because we don't teach our children how to behave in the society, do's and don'ts for our children, let it be girls or boys. And now there's a concept of nuclear family, and in each family the children are being pampered to such an extent that they are thinking, they think that they are the only ones in the society, and they need to get everything which they demand of them. And that gives rise to such a situation where there is a gap in the learning session where sharing, caring is not being taught to them, which I'm talking about middle class and upper middle class children. Coming down to the children who are below that, they don't get proper schooling, they don't get all the benefits of the state schemes, and then what happens? They resort to such kind of. So we as a society members are to be made responsible for the children who indulge in such kind of crime. Like we talk about street children committing crime or street children involved in serious heinous crime, such as drug abuse and drug peddling, arms trafficking, human trafficking. So these are the some serious heinous crimes which we see day to day in our society happen. Now, how we can actually lessen this by keeping an alert, looking after, there are lots of NGOs who work for the street children, lots of NGOs who work for children in particular, and they get a huge resources from the state to see that these children do not indulge in criminal. So what happens is that, as I was talking about the age of the child between 16 and 18, the psychological, mental, physical, and educational requirements have to be fulfilled of these children so that the crime cannot be eradicated, and crime can be committed by anyone, sometimes in right of private defense, sometimes enticing. Committing crime is so enticing. So what happens is that children resort to crime. So if we really want to minimize this, then we have to take a holistic approach by punishing them like adults, sending them to correct. What happens is that if a child is treated as an adult, then the child can be given life imprisonment or death penalty also for the crime which he has committed. Then in that case, the human rights perspective of reformation, rehabilitation, and reintegration of these children will be trusted. So by this, I am thankful to the audience who patiently listened to me and given this opportunity. I will now open myself for questions. Thank you all.
Hello, Ashish, am I audible?
Yes, Sham, you are audible.
Thank you so much, Kavita ma'am, for sharing your valuable insights. We are highly obliged as you spared an hour for us from your tough time schedule. Thank you so much, ma'am. And I think this webinar has been fruitful to many of us. And with this, I would like to start some of the questions which has been raised by people. And if someone has some other question also, they can raise their hands. So, ma'am, first question is what I personally think, and one of my batchmates, Shefali Sharma, also thinks like this only. That, ma'am, in Delhi, ma'am, in that Nirbhaya rape case, the doctors they have in their report they have stated that this is not rape, this is madness. So ma'am, if a minor has been involved in such a case where it was not a rape, it was a madness. So ma'am, do you think that he should be means he should not be given that death penalty?
We are in an era where we find that there are many countries who have abolished death penalty, right? So still India is one of the countries who has retained death penalty. Is death penalty a solution? If one convict is given death penalty, like let it be a child or an adult, if he has given death penalty, will you ensure that other people will not be involved in such criminal activity again? Does it act as a deterrent? It doesn't. So in such situation, I believe in Krishna Iyer justice and in our Ramayana and Mahabharata that every criminal should get an opportunity of being reformed and rehabilitated. So every criminal has his past, and if given an opportunity, can have a very beautiful future. So why can't we use that person's potentiality by, by asking him to do certain community services or certain jobs which others won't like to do. You're getting my point. So that will be, and if we make a person live for more years and more years in with fetters, which fetters cannot be seen. If you kill that person, you give him death penalty, he's removed from the society, and he gets a pain only for few seconds. But if you give him pain, which will be painful every moment he lives, I think that is more painful than giving death penalty. I am one of the activists who is against death penalty for the reason that we cannot give life to anyone. So if we cannot give life, we don't have the authority to take that life. But we have the authority to use that life in such a manner, according to our whims and fancy, to make that person realize every moment that what crime he has done. Removing that person is not the solution. Some of you might not be agreeing with me, but you are too young to understand that aspect, what I am trying to analyze. Right? That after some
Ma'am,
time, some years of your research and investigation, what you do in your uh, study, you will find that, and understand that what I am saying is correct. And this
ma'am,
debate
sorry.
goes on, this debate of death penalty and not death penalty is going on for years. And I don't think so death penalty is a punishment. It is just removing the person from the society. But it is not the required punishment one should get. You may say that,
Ma'am,
ma'am,
so,
I'm not agreeing that he will be put in imprisonment. Because when he is sent to prison, he is using the hard state money which comes from the taxpayer. So just providing him living so in the prison, that is not my answer. My answer is that he has to be asked to do certain work which would actually make him feel that he has committed a crime and that work has been taken for that, and he would die each and every moment which he is actually living. That kind of punishment, not just imprisonment. Life imprisonment with rigorous imprisonment is also not the answer. Okay. Yes. Nishan, please.
uh,
I'm sorry I stopped you.
no issues, ma'am. No, ma'am. Sorry to counter you, but ma'am, if we take that example of Delhi rape case, ma'am, in that rape case, just before that incident took place, they all were drunk. Means that minor was also took drink. He knew that after means after being drunk, he could do anything. He would not be in his control. So, ma'am, everything happened with a willful intention. So, ma'am. Why he can't be prosecuted because ma'am he was also involved in spoiling the life of that girl, and he was equally responsible, ma'am.
I agree with you. I completely agree with you that, so he
Yes,
took the life of that girl. Not only he, the others were also equally
yes,
responsible for taking away the life. But, by giving death penalty to the others, are we able to stop the crime? Today's morning newspaper and the electronic media is full of news of that UP rape incident. I am forgetting the place. Uh, some just I don't remember. Okay, so that incident like
Hathras.
Nirbhaya is happening. Yes. So the incident like Nirbhaya is happening every day. And if we give death penalty, will it ensure that the crime will not happen in the society? What you give me one step how we can eradicate or minimize this crime in the society. What steps have to be taken? And is there any political will to actually stop these crimes? Is there any political will? By making stringent laws and or black letter law, are we able to eradicate these crimes from the society? No, right? So
Yes,
what steps are we taking to actually see that our women are protected, our society is protected? Well, let's work on those lines. By making stringent laws, is it sufficient?
Yes.
Getting my point, what I'm trying to
Yes.
say. And this
Yes.
debate of death penalty and life imprisonment is there before us. It will continue even after us. And both of us can argue for us, for and against. But that
Yes.
is not the solution. Our solution should be how to see that our women in the society are protected, our men in the society are protected, and how we can minimize these crimes, give least opportunity to the prospective criminals from committing this, right?
Okay, ma'am. Oh, thank you, ma'am. So,
Next question.
Ashish, there is a question from Ashruta Singh. Kindly unmute her mic.
Nishant, I have already done.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Ashruta,
Nishant, I'm
please.
unmuted.
Okay, okay. Please ask your question.
Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Ashrita. I'm a LLB second year student. Ma'am, I want to ask you, don't you think we should categorize the punishment on the basis of crime, not on the basis of the age? Like if someone is minor or like 15-year or 16-year and he's doing that level of heinous crime, so I think we should categorize the punishment on the basis of their crime. Age shouldn't be a hurdle or bar.
Shruta, I'm not remembering one judgment, one case where, the father was abusing the mother, domestic violence case, and a child below the age of 7 years took the kitchen knife and pierced into the body of the father from back, and it proved fatal. Now, do you think that the child who is below the 7 years of age should be imprisoned, given death penalty for killing his father? Ashruta,
Yes, ma'am.
getting
No,
it?
ma'am, I'm not. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I'm getting
So
it.
that why we are considering this age. If you look into
And I'm considering like when there are rape cases. In most of the cases, we keenly observe that usually there are the boys who are like a teenage, like in between 14 to 18 years or 21, 22 years. So they usually do the rape or these things like out of curiosity. So
I
if
agree
they
with
are
you. Ashruta,
if
you
they
yourself
are
use the
mature
word
enough,
curiosity, right?
yes,
Now
yes,
government has done lot of changes. They have introduced a chapter in the higher classes on reproductive aspect. But though no teacher teaches. If the teacher is having teaching in a co-education school, says you this chapter you teach on your own. Learn on your own. If it is a boys' school, teacher would not teach that reproductive subject. If it is a
yes.
boys' school, girls' school, boy teacher, he will not teach. So what happens, and we are in the family don't talk about sex with our children. Do we talk about? Our society is a conservative society. And I told you that this age, 16 to 18 or 20 or 21, which you said, this is the age where a boy and a girl both grow mentally and physically both. And there are certain inquisitiveness in their mind, which the answers they don't get. And they try to get these answers from their peer groups, which is an incomplete and, misleading kind of a thing. And this leads to this kind of crime more, according to me. And to deal with this, what happens is that what I did towards my end of the study, I said that society has to be responsible. Now, see, if someone has already committed crime, we have made changes. We have made the laws very stringent. And now what happens? We are treating that child at par with an adult if he has committed that heinous crime of rape or sexual abuse. In the POCSO law also we are having very stringent punishment. When children are involved or when the child is in conflict with law and committed an offense against a child. Recently there were so many cases reported in the newspaper. So what I am saying is that if one act of rape or one act of sexual abuse, what will happen? The whole life of that girl or a boy is going to be frustrated. That means, we are going to punish him If he gets his punishment after 5 years, 6 years, he's going to become an adult like 18, 19. And in the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act only, the provision is that if he is punished and he has to undergo imprisonment of life imprisonment or 7 years or more imprisonment, so he will remain in the juvenile home for till the age of 21 years. After 21 years, he will be sent to the correctional home. Now, when he goes to the correctional home, he will come in company with more serious criminals who are convicts there. If we talk about Tihar jail, then all terrorists and the drug addicts and drug peddlers and human traffickers are there in Tihar jail. So they will come in company with those kind of criminals and become hardcore criminals there. And they would plan how to commit more crime in the society. So what do you want? We should actually think of think in a manner that they don't come in company with the hardcore criminals. They get an opportunity of reformation and rehabilitation and reintegration. I'm not saying that put a plate of full of good food and good environment before him or make correctional home a very tourism place for him. I'm asking that he should be punished with such a punishment that if he is asked to clean the drains every day, anyone would like to clean drain every day? Nobody would like to clean drain every day. So ask him to do certain jobs which are very, very, which would really make him realize that this he had committed that crime and therefore he is asked to do this work, and that would humiliate him and make him die every moment he lives. So that would be a greater punishment, and that would act as a deterrent also. That people will know in the society that if you are committing this crime, you will be punished with this kind of punishment, and you will be asked to do certain community services. That would be more more punishment than death penalty or life imprisonment. Or if he has committed rape, I know the pain or agony or suffering which the victim has faced cannot be replaced by any punishment given to that convict. But what is an alternate? Then, if we remove him from the society, is that a solution? I don't think so. That is a solution. Anyone else? Any question? Very hard to believe at a young age. Advocating for removing death penalty.
Ma'am, there's a question from S.A. Rishikesh. Ashish, please unmute the mic of S.A. Rishikesh. Ma'am, just one last question.
Nishant,
Okay, I
please
can
tell
take
him
more
that.
questions also.
Nishant, please tell him that raise his hand. Yes, okay.
Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm a second year student, and my question is I totally agree with you that death penalty is not a solution, but when there are cases which are very rare, like rarest of rare cases, in those circumstances, should a juvenile not be treated like an adult?
He is been treated like an adult. No, now the law has been made in such a way that he is been treated like an adult. He is produced before the children court, and proper trial of his case would take place if he has committed serious crime. Then there is punishment also, which is there. But now the act per se explicitly does not say. But if a person will be tried for rape of a child below the age of 12 years, then mandatory death penalty. In 2019 we have amended the law. So the law has been made in such a way. If you see, we have made changes in the criminal law IPC 376, and we have made changes in POCSO law as well. So we see that laws are made stringent. There to give, I can't help anything. It was only my observation which I presented before you, where I am saying that the solution cannot be there. But now, say the trial court judge will give death penalty. Trial court judge will give death penalty. Recently, one of the additional district judge has given, he had stripped one girl in his school, above 16 years and below 18 years. Okay, class 8 or 9 student, I don't remember that. It was in the local newspaper that that boy had stripped, and the additional district judge had actually released that accused under the POCSO Act by convicting him and releasing him on admonition. That means he was scolded and he was given an opportunity that if you are going to be again committing such kind of crime, in POCSO cases, what happens if the case has been registered, there is no bail. Okay, and one can get bail if it is a soft case from High Court, but the trial costs hands are tied. And this court I'm talking about is a children court. So he had stripped a girl. It is a very serious, heinous crime, and it is very, very painful for the survivor. But if we are imprisoning him for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, whatever may be the punishment, what justice the judge would do by sending him to the prison? Then he will learn more tricks of committing crime. So he was given an opportunity by the judge by releasing him on admonition. And what I feel that here the judge has been right in doing so, that this is a lesson for him. He had undergone all the sufferings which one has to go. He was taken into custody. He was given proper trial. He was appearing before the court. He was released on bail, and parents had taken his custody, given a bond that he's not going to repeat the offense. The child also gave a bond that he's not going to repeat the offense. So the sufferings which one criminal should go was gone through consecutively. And after say 18 months, the judge had given this punishment. So I appreciated the judge because I felt that this judge has given that child, that boy, opportunity to be reformed and rehabilitated and reintegrated into the society, so that he is not going to commit the same offense again. So that is what I am saying, that say a person has to be arrested. That is such a painful. If you have committed crime and go escape punishment, that you are not arrested, you are not located, that is different. But when a person has been apprehended, proper procedure is been taken place, every day you feel that you will be convicted, you will have to undergo imprisonment. That is also quite a painful episode, I believe. And at the end, if you find that he has got a release, though he will be convicted, he will not get any government job, because in government job you have to get a clearance from the local police that no criminal case was against you and you did not was not convicted any offense. So this boy is convicted, and he cannot get any government job or any government benefits. But what happens? In return, he has been got an opportunity to live a reformed life, a rehabilitated life, and reintegrate into the society. So that is what I feel is real justice. Thank you, Rishikesh.
Thank you so much, Kavita ma'am. Really, this session was very insightful, and we don't want to end this session, but ma'am, due to scarcity of time, we have to complete it within a stipulated time hour. Ma'am, now I would like to invite our director, Professor Dr. Moin Athar sir, to give away the vote of thanks. Ashish, please unmute the mic of Professor Dr. Moin Athar sir.
Thank you, Professor Kavita ma'am. We are really thankful to you that you have spared your precious time from your busy schedule, and we are highly obliged and highly indebted with your so much useful webinar for the students, in which you have covered the provisions of Indian Penal Code, the provisions of juvenile justice, and various other laws which covers the juvenile. We are really thankful to you. Such kind of webinar is very much useful during this pandemic, because during this pandemic we are not in this capacity to organize any offline webinar or offline seminar. Because of that, we are here, that we are bound to organize such kind of webinar, and such kind of cooperation from your side is really thankful for us. I'm highly indebted to you, and I hope that such kind of cooperation from your side will be continued in near future. I'm thankful to all the students who have participated in this webinar. Because of limited number of students in intake in Zoom, because that's why maximum number of students have been deprived to attend this webinar. Next time we will try to consider such kind of webinar on any other app like Google Meet, where the unlimited participants can participate in the event. I'm really thankful to all the faculties of Institute of Legal Studies who have cooperated and attended the seminar. Such kind of webinar could become possible by the cooperation of Honorable Chancellor Sir, Honorable Pro Chancellor Ma'am, Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, Registrar Sir, and my learned colleagues. From the cooperation of all these, such kind of webinar could be possible. I'm highly indebted to all the organizing committee of webinar, my 9th semester students, final year students, who have really organized this webinar beautifully. I'm thankful to all of them, especially Nishant, who has compared the program very beautifully. Ashish, Nishant, all of them have really very effectively participated and organized the program. And lastly, I'm again thankful to Professor Kavita Singh for sharing his beautiful presentation experience with the students. I'm really thankful to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mohin sir. Once again, I would like to thank everyone for joining this wonderful session, and thank you so much, Kavita ma'am, that you accepted our invitation and joined for this session as a guest speaker. So now I would like to request Ashish to kindly end this meeting.